I Hate Politics is a podcast about a human activity we love to hate. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. It's Tuesday and time for another news episode. But this week, we have changed it up a bit. Later this week, we begin a series of candidate interviews, starting with the most contested local race for the new Montgomery County executive. But before we do that, I wanted to run out the bank of interviews debriefing the 2026 General Assembly session so that they do not become stale. This week, we have State Senator Jeff Waldstreicher explaining state level regulation of gaming, internet gaming, and the thinking about hot prediction markets. The General Assembly did not move on gaming bills this year. As background, Maryland has long been a horse racing and betting state going back to the 19th century. The state allowed an official lottery in the 1970s and casinos in 2008, tabletop games like blackjack and poker in 2012, and finally, sports betting and mobile sports betting in 2022. The profits from all that gambling, about $800 million annually, goes to support education in the state. This money seems even more critical now given the state's projected fiscal deficits. The question in front of the state are these. First, will the state allow online internet gambling platforms, including on mobile phones? Clearly, Marylanders are gambling on their phones now. We don't know how much, but we know that the state's licensed casinos, and consequently the state itself, is not getting any of that revenue. Second, will the state's licensed casinos be allowed to offer internet gaming? But equally, how will the illegal internet gaming sites be closed down, at least for those physically inside the state of Maryland? If these sites are not banned and closed, then the licensed casinos in Maryland would have to compete with the unregulated casinos operated out of places like the Bahamas. To allow internet gaming first requires an approved ballot question in the elections. Now that has to wait until 2028. Third, one of the hottest gambling opportunities now are prediction markets like Kalshi and Poly that allow you to bet on almost anything. Prediction markets are a bone of contention between the federal and state governments. Gambling is traditionally a state subject, but the Trump administration has claimed jurisdiction over prediction markets, claiming that this type of transaction involves a securities trade, and thus the province of the National Commodities Exchange and SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission. States, including Maryland, reject that notion. Stay with us for more with State Senator Jeff Waldstreicher.
What's the matter? You seem so surprised. Glancing in the morning paper tonight. Seems that the French can capitalize. Another execution, another spy. During General dead and died. Watch his family cry. Watch his family cry.
I Hate Politics is a podcast about our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools and streets, and our local governments as they function in diverse and democratic societies. This means our politics are messy, dirty, sometimes corrupt, with often self-serving politicians. But no matter how much we may hate politics, we are never exempt from it, even when we refuse to participate. In fact, the purpose of politics is to keep society functioning precisely when we don't agree with each other, like now. Music for this episode comes from Silver Spring rock musician J.D. Brayton, who goes by the stage name Mr. Tree Frog. The two songs we play in this episode are Halo and Troubled Sleep. You can find his music on Bandcamp. Jeff Wallstreicher, welcome back to I Hate Politics.
Thank you for having me.
This session that just ended, the Maryland General Assembly did not pass gaming legislation, but many bills were introduced. What bills were introduced? And you had one yourself.
This was a year where we really set the table for future consideration of how gambling should work in Maryland. The two big topics that we are focused on in Annapolis, the first is iGaming and whether iGaming should be legalized in Maryland. I think that's going to be decided next year. The second topic is offshore gambling and how offshore gambling should be integrated into Maryland's current system. And then, of course, eventually we're going to have to deal with prediction markets and the balance between federal and state regulation and how Maryland will approach prediction markets.
Let's start with the offshore gambling bill. What is the state of play?
Offshore gambling is currently illegal in Maryland, but we have no mechanism to enforce against the operators of offshore gambling. And so we're losing revenue. And the revenue we're losing is revenue that would go to support our public schools, fund Medicaid expansion, and otherwise do important things in our state budget. And of course, we will also want to support our local casinos. We've legalized casinos. We have unionized workers in our local casinos, including in Prince George's County and Baltimore City. And so offshore casinos really strip the very basis of Maryland's casino program. And we need to take steps to enforce against those offshore casinos.
How was your bill trying to do that?
The bill would provide both a private right of action as well as an opportunity for the Attorney General and our Lottery Commission to enforce against offshore casinos. These are casinos that are based in places like the Cayman Islands or other tax havens offshore, trying to avoid Maryland law.
How would your bill have allowed that enforcement to occur?
The Attorney General has investigatory authority. They would know, just in the same way that any lawsuit that they pursue, they would seek discovery, they would get evidence, and they would utilize that evidence to mount a civil case against these offshore casinos. Offshore gambling is currently not legal under Maryland law, but there's just no enforcement mechanism. So this provides the enforcement mechanism.
So it's not legal, and the Attorney General cannot do anything about something that is not legal?
That's correct. When we made gambling legal in Maryland through our local casinos and through sports betting, we neglected to provide a structure by which we would hold people accountable who work outside of those strictures. We just didn't anticipate the sheer amount of lawlessness that would occur offshore. Some of these offshore casinos are just for profit. They're just money-making opportunities, but some are associated with organized crime. And that's ever more reason to enforce against offshore casinos.
How large of a problem is it?
We're not exactly sure because it's hard to measure the amount of money that's going offshore, but we think it's a big problem. And we know that in a tight budget year, as next year will unquestionably be, the amount of revenue that we can bring back onshore through Maryland regulated casinos will be substantial.
You said your bill would have allowed private right of action. Explain what that means and how that would actually apply here.
Our local casinos here in Maryland, they are being harmed by the offshore activity. In part, they're being harmed because they have expenses that offshore casinos don't have. They have regulatory and legal and compliance expenses that these offshore companies do not have. Of course, they also, most importantly, have unionized workers, middle-class workers that are living here in Maryland that they pay that the offshore casinos do not have to pay. And so incentivizing our Maryland casinos to take action against their offshore competitors is also a good way to make sure that these offshore competitors are placed out of business.
So they could sue.
That's right.
So much on the internet, all kinds of illegal activity, drugs, pornography, remains essentially unenforced against. What is your hope that in your particular case, the offshore gaming there would be enforcement?
My hope is that it becomes a very tiny part of the market. And we've seen this work with cannabis. It's a strange analogy, I know, but Maryland has regulated for sale cannabis throughout our state. There's one opening not far from me in Kensington. There's cannabis markets in Wheaton and Bethesda and other areas that I represent. And for the most part, not completely, they've put the gray market out of business, the illicit market out of business. When you provide a safe, legal, regulated alternative, it works.
The problem is a little bit different than the cannabis example, right? Because offshore betting markets will continue to exist even if Maryland bans them. They will continue to exist. They will go into other states, they'll go into other countries. And at that time, it really is up to Maryland residents to either use a VPN or some other methodology in order to access. So, can you speak to what the attractiveness of offshore betting is relative to in-state betting? Is it a price differential? Why do people want to go to offshore betting when there is a safe alternative already available?
I think it has more to do with ease and having it on your phone. Offshore gaming happens online, and your ability to get into it very fast is much easier than having to either travel to a casino, or obviously in Maryland, sports betting is allowed, but not everyone feels comfortable doing sports betting.
This is a good segue to iGaming because that does allow internet-based gaming and presumably on your phone. Allowing iGaming may push the offshore betting, which is taking advantage of mobile betting. That may actually push it out. Is that the understanding?
That's possible. There's no question about it, but there are also trade-offs for having iGaming, and those are the trade-offs that the Senate especially is considering. The House has shown a strong interest in moving towards iGaming. The Senate, where I serve, has been more skeptical.
And skeptical on account of addiction issues mainly?
I think that's right. I mean, it's hard for me to speak to 47 members, but my sense is that it has to do with issues of problem gaming.
There were bills introduced. What did the bills actually say?
The iGaming bills legalize iGaming in Maryland. It's already legal in Pennsylvania, so people have a sense of what that might look like. And it provides a regulatory structure by which iGaming would take place.
Can I, as a Maryland resident, participate in a Pennsylvania iGaming?
You cannot do so from Maryland. You would have to be in Pennsylvania to participate in it.
Okay, so these are geofenced.
That's correct.
Since Pennsylvania has iGaming, has it made a dent, in fact, on the offshore betting, which is totally illegal and you want to ban?
I do not know. We have a sense of how iGaming has worked in Pennsylvania as to revenue, and we have a sense of how it's worked as to problem gaming. But we don't have a sense of how much it put a dent in offshore gambling in that state.
Okay. How has it behaved with respect to revenue and addiction?
So there's been substantial revenue in Pennsylvania from iGaming, but it has not lived up to its original projections. And so it's a mixed bag is probably the answer when it comes to revenue. So there's money there, but there's not as much money as people thought there was going to be.
Now, iGaming operators, would they be the same as the casino operators or would they be different? I mean, who is applying for these licenses, do you think?
In Pennsylvania, some of it is the current operators of actual casinos, of physical casinos, and some of it is new players who do not have an existing casino license. We know that in Maryland, some of the casinos support iGaming because they want to get into that space and they see revenue there for themselves. Some do not. They want that revenue to go exclusively through our regular traditional casinos. And so there's a split in the industry among those who want to pursue iGaming in Maryland and those who do not.
Is all gambling in the US state-based then?
That's right. All gambling, with the possible exception of prediction markets, and I know we're going to get to this, is a state-based regulatory structure.
Before we get to prediction markets, I want to talk a little bit about the benefits of gaming that have accrued to Maryland.
So the revenue from gaming goes directly to our public schools. And so I have 3 kids in public schools. I graduated from MCPS, and I'm glad we have this revenue supporting public schools. Of course, some of the revenue goes back into the system, meaning we have to fund our very important problem gaming programs to reduce the human costs to gambling, which is a real cost that Maryland policymakers, including me, have to be cognizant of. The gambling revenue started slowly, but has now really normalized in a way that I think meets expectations. There's also economic development benefits. Now, that's not uniform because you see in Prince George's County and National Harbor huge economic development benefits of that area that came from the arrival of this high-end casino. And now we know that the Sphere, the venue in Las Vegas, is building a new Sphere, their second Sphere in National Harbor. That's only because of the economic development that has occurred there because of MGM. And so these sites as entertainment sites can be powerful economic development opportunities. But you also see some areas where that impact is not as great. I was recently not far from the casino in Baltimore City. It is a beautiful, beautiful facility, but you don't see the same economic development around the casino that you do in Prince George's County.
The state gets over $800 million now from gaming every year. Is that correct?
That's right. Yep.
Okay. Let's talk about the big issue of prediction markets. Kalshi, others are obviously really big players in that market. And there has been considerable controversy over whether states should regulate them or the federal government. The federal government has claimed jurisdiction, saying that they are, in fact, futures contracts. So therefore, the commodities exchange should govern them rather than states. First, maybe explain the lay of the land as you see it, and then what possibilities are there to regulate them, and what are you thinking about?
Well, the lay of the land is that prediction markets is gambling, and gambling is the province of the states. And the states should be allowed to regulate this market like they do sports betting or casinos. This is gambling. It's not futures contracts, whatever pretextual reason that the Trump administration is giving to benefit their buddies who are invested in these companies is not true. It's just them trying to get rich, which is normal for the Trump administration, their family, their cronies. There are certain things that have traditionally been regulated by the states. There is a pretty clear division in what the federal government does and what the states do. Federal government regulates securities. These aren't securities. Federal government regulates air transportation and things that are interstate, but states do things like regulate insurance markets. The line between what states do and the federal government does is pretty clear. And it's unambiguous to me that this is on the state side of things. Now, I get it. I'm a state senator. Of course, I'm going to say that. But this is gambling, and Maryland should shortly get in the business of regulating these very dangerous and problematic markets.
If it is, in fact, run out of California and played in Maryland, is that on an interstate basis, not on a securities basis, be considered the province of the federal government rather than the state?
Not at all. All the casino companies are national companies. MGM is a national company. Caesars is a national company that have interstate business. The fact that the business itself might be interstate doesn't change the fact that within Maryland, we have the power to regulate those businesses. Same thing with insurance, right? Geico is a national company. You see 20 of their ads during a football game. The fact that they have an interstate business doesn't change the fact that Maryland and each state exclusively have the power to regulate our insurers.
If it is the case that residents are choosing to go to a website that is out there in the ether, how do you get in there and regulate. So if you don't allow them, then Kalshi should fence off Maryland off from its app.
I don't think we're at that point. I think we are first asserting our regulatory authority when it comes to prediction markets. I don't think there's anyone saying right now in Maryland that we need to ban these markets. But what we are saying is that as a state, we have the power to regulate those markets. Listen, everything you're saying with regard to, companies being based elsewhere in this nation applies to sports betting. We already do this very well in Maryland. We regulate FanDuel. We regulate DraftKings. These are not Maryland companies. They are not based here. They have no physical infrastructure here, but we regulate those companies. We legalize sports betting. It was the right thing to do. People enjoy it for entertainment. Some people make money off of it. Most people, of course, lose money off of it. We get that revenue for our schools. It's working well for sports betting. And there is no Maryland hook for those other than it is gaming, and gaming is regulated by the states. The same thing is true for prediction markets.
Do you have a sense of the use of prediction markets in Maryland relative to other states? Because one of the predictors of heavy gambling is actually wealth. Where there is wealth, there is gambling. Maryland is a wealthy state. Do you have a sense of how big the problem is here?
We do not. The prediction markets, as you know, have insisted that, like the Trump administration, that they should fall under federal regulation. And so we don't have access to the information that we would even need to get a picture of what they're doing here in Maryland. They won't provide it. But it doesn't happen all at once. We create essentially an infrastructure for regulation that provides us with additional information, and then we can figure out where to go from there. But we can only do that once we pass the bill that would set up this regulatory structure.
What does a bill that sets up the regulatory structure look like?
Well, it looks like the same bill that we passed to originally regulate casinos in Maryland, and that we later passed to regulate table games, which we expanded in Maryland after we did slots originally. And it looks like the bill that we utilized to regulate sports betting. And to a lesser extent, it looks like the bill we had to regulate marijuana. I mean, these structures exist. They're not foreign to the people who know how to do them. And they're important to protect consumer safety, make sure the right operators are here, and that we do it right.
Just to go through the list of things that it would have is that explicit legal, permitting system, taxing, collection, addiction support.
I would add one last thing that's unique to prediction market, and that is insider trade, insider use of these prediction markets to make money. That would be an additional part that is unique to prediction markets. We know that members of the Trump administration are utilizing prediction markets to make money. We know that there are bets coming out of the Pentagon that preceded the war in Iran that bet on oil prices, on Kalshi. And so we would need additional protections against insider trading on these markets.
Now, insider trading is only governed by SEC in the country, right?
So that's only partially true. If you work for MGM, you're not placing bets at MGM. We already regulate insider use of casinos because they might have knowledge that the general public does not. And so I know you don't hear a lot about that, but we do have regulations currently about who can place bets in casinos. And to be honest, we do the same with lottery, right? We have a state-owned lottery. A member of the lottery commission can't go and buy a lottery ticket and win, because they might have inside information about that lottery. And so we actually already do this. You just don't hear about it because it's working.
Pentagon folks betting on Kalshi prediction markets are not Kalshi employees. That's a different category, right? It's one thing to be able to control your employees and say that one of the requirements for you to have this job at MGM is that you cannot bet on MGM in MGM facilities. But if MGM employee goes to a Caesars and gambles there, they're allowed.
Nonetheless, the fact that insider trading for securities is regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission doesn't change the fact that we have the ability to regulate gambling, and that insider trading on gambling platforms is still gambling. It doesn't transmute it into an SEC activity.
That's a huge investigatory burden, right? To now investigate insider trading involving, you know, some Pentagon official, maybe betting on a prediction market, maybe living in Maryland, maybe not.
First of all, it only apply if there's a Maryland nexus. We have that ability now. As you know, the Attorney General is Anthony Brown. He's got a robust law enforcement process. We're talking about extending that, as you and I discussed, to offshore gaming. And there's no reason to think that these incredible professionals who do this for a living, that it would be some type of burden on them.
Pentagon is most of that information is classified. How will Maryland officials even have access to classified information when they would have to get classification first in order to be able to get it? Not because they can't do it, but because it's a huge infrastructure to erect.
I think that's right. But if this industry is going to be as big as these companies say it's going to be, I think we owe it to ourselves to make sure it's a clean, legitimate market, not some cesspool of insider trading. And we've got great law enforcement officials who have those skill sets.
Are there any companies more willing to do that than companies that are not?
Well, I think that's what you'll see if you set up effective regulation. Right now, Kalshi is out in front because they're willing to take risk on liability that other companies perhaps may not be willing to take. They are essentially, in this, ask for an apology, not for permission. And so Kalshi is moving faster and breaking things along the way. But there are companies that perhaps will act more sensibly or legitimately, who will get in this space but need the prediction, like the predictability of a regulated market in order to get into that space.
What is the difficult decision to make with respect to gaming apart from the addiction issue?
The big decisions in front of us when it comes to gaming is whether the current tax rate for current regulated gambling will remain the same. The question will be, do we take a more aggressive regulatory approach against offshore gaming? Do we legalize iGaming in Maryland? And what do we do with regards to prediction markets? All of that will be resolved in the next legislative session.
Do you think there is a trade-off that already in 2025, you raise the taxes on gaming from 15 to 20%? Would the industry be willing to accept an even higher rate if you gave them a shutdown on the offshore betting that is draining their revenues?
I don't know the answer to that question. I can't speak for the gaming industry. You describe something like a compromise or an opportunity at consensus, and I think that's what you're going to see. Not everyone is going to be happy. Oftentimes, as you know, that means that you've landed in a good place. But building towards a consensus is, I think, an important thing. And if the casinos in Maryland, our unionized casinos, get more revenue by cracking down on offshore gaming, there may be an opportunity to also increase the amount of revenue that the state gets from those casinos. Yes.
Jeff Wallstriker, good luck next session.
I got to catch up on sleep from this session, but then I'll be ready to go.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
That's all for this episode of I Hate Politics, where we aim to stem the decline in local news by working with community voices. Don't forget to tune in to our Tuesday morning news analysis. I Hate Politics is produced by me, Sunil Dasgupta. Music for this episode comes from Silver Spring rock musician J.D. Brayton, who goes by the stage name Mr. Tree Frog. The two songs we play in this episode are Halo and Troubled Sleep. You can find his music on Bandcamp. If you want to share your music on the show or know someone else who might want to, please email producer@ihbpod.org. I hope you'll subscribe and share the podcast as we bring you stories about politics close to you and to your home. See you next time.
thing, yeah, no, you done wrong, man, man, no